chess friends, my college exams are coming in 2 days, and for the rest of the week, I can't play any chess matches with anyone. Nevertheless, I will upload chess openings and their traps every day. Today, I have an aggressive opening that is also really easy to learn. Here is the perfect opening for you. Let's go over the most commonly played moves. We go right into the Italian game, and here I recommend that you play the Evans Gambit. What's crazy about the variation I'm about to share with you is that you win against all the most common replies of your opponents. So after b4, you're hitting the bishop, ready to push the pawn forward and chase away the knight. They are going to grab this pawn either by the knight or by the bishop, which doesn't matter because you're gonna play pawn c3 and chase it back. After that, you follow up with d4, hitting both the bishop and the pawn. Therefore, they trade on d4, now you recapture, and the bishop is attacked. They move to b4 in order to deliver check to your king, and here is the trick. All of a sudden, you just move your king to f1. Now, this is a natural move to play because typically, you are suggested not to keep your king in the middle of the board, so instead, most players just cover their king with the bishop or the knight, but kf1 turns out to be much stronger for a funny reason. We're actually going to grab this bishop for nothing, we're not gonna trade it off, we're gonna win it. The most played move by black in this position is pawn to d6, and it is quite understandable because white is ready to play d5 and drive away this knight. If black tries to bring the other knight into the game, you can always push it with your other pawn from e5, therefore, it makes sense for black to try to get some space and some control over the center. But what they're missing is the move pawn to d5 that basically gives you a winning advantage right away that drives this knight somewhere from c6, as it moves. It doesn't really matter where it goes. For example, on e5, that actually fails to queen a4, which is a double attack to the king and this bishop on b4. You can first trade knights just to simplify matters for you, and after that, you win with this double attack queen a4 check to the king as well as a double attack on the bishop, as expected. We're gonna grab the bishop for nothing, we're not gonna trade it off, so it's a bishop e7, queen takes d4, we want a bishop, and besides that, what I like about it is that your position is actually superior anyway, so on top of having an extra bishop, the queen is hitting this pawn from b7, you also cut off your opponent's king, therefore, it can't castle. If you want to reinforce this idea, you can even bring your bishop over here to a3. And then you'll have really strong control over these squares, so your opponent can never castle. Besides having an extra bishop, your position is better anyway and more active, so hopefully, you're gonna win this. Alright, that covers the most played move pawn to d6. Strangely enough, it weakens this diagonal, and you can take advantage of this. You first play d5, change the way this knight, and then with queen a4, you have this double attack to the king and bishop, therefore, you win. Alright. What else can your opponent play? The other two common moves by black are to develop this knight either to e7 or to f6, getting ready to castle on the next move. In both cases, you're gonna play the same moves, so that again, as promised, it's gonna be simple for you, don't have to know a lot of stuff. We're gonna talk about knight f6, but knight e7 is gonna be the same stuff, right? So knight f6 is just a little bit more challenging because it also attacks your opponent, therefore, knight e7, same stuff. Now in this case, queen a4 is not an option because this diagonal is closed, the pawn is still on d7, therefore, we're going for another tactic. We play queen b3 in this case, which creates this battery against this pawn f7, and from there, we're gonna check the king. Therefore, your opponent wants to castle and cover this pawn, but after that, you play d5, basically pursuing the same idea. You want to drive away this knight, after that, pick up this undefeated bishop on b4, and that's how, once again, you win a game or at least achieve a winning advantage within a couple of moves. Normally, it's pretty simple. The next move, you're gonna grab one of these two pieces. After that, just develop, however you like, keep attacking, life's good. I'll show you one line, you don't have to necessarily remember it, but just to show you what could possibly happen. Let's say they grab your pawn. You grab this knight on c6. Now, the nice thing is that sometimes they'll recapture, and on top of blundering this knight on c6, they'll also blunder this bishop on b4, so then that's really cool. However, what if they play a bishop c5? That's possibly the only variation that could theoretically confuse you a little bit because they start counter-attacking. You may be unsure what to do here. There are different ways to go about this. The move that I like the most is to seek activity, right? So instead of defending, you play knight c3, so, of course, you could take material here, but knight c3, I believe, is just easier and stronger, so knight c3 attacks this knight, but black doesn't want to trade off, they want to grab this pawn, that's their point, they hit the rook, and for the moment, it looks like black is doing fine, or at least they're complicating matters, but it's not the case because you're gonna counterblow with bishop g5, hitting their queen. What can they do now? They can't move this pawn because it's pinned by the bishop, they can't cover it with the bishop because the bishop needs to defend this knight on f2 or else you're gonna capture it, so they have to play this little bit awkward move queen to e8, after that, you can keep chasing the queen with rook to e1, and this time they can't really cover it, nicely enough, after let's say something like knight h1, you just keep erasing his army completely, you grab the queen, after that, you can grab this pawn on f7. Check to the king, grab this rook on e8, grab this pawn on b7, as well as a couple more pieces, and you literally erase his position, he really has no material left, and you're gonna win this game. So far, we analyzed the most common scenario, but how about the other option besides playing bishop to c5 back to where it was? Black could also move the bishop to a5, it happens rarely on the amateur level, but nevertheless, you got to be ready. In this case, I recommend that you castle first. You could play d4, but it no longer hits the bishop on c5 because there is no bishop, so it's better to put the king to safety. Black will play knight f6, and now you play your move pawn to d4, creating some pressure. They're gonna take, and then you play a key move, bishop a3, instead of recapturing, you take control over this diagonal. And therefore your opponent is not allowed to castle anymore, and we want to keep this king in the center and checkmate it as soon as we can. Now another unpleasant threat that is coming is pawn to e5, that's gonna attack this knight. Usually, black feels annoyed by these both threats, and they try to stop them by going pawn d6, right, so that they're ready to castle, and once again, we won't let them have that easy life. We play pawn e5, willing to sacrifice this pawn to reopen the diagonal, which happens after a pawn takes, and the king remains locked in the center of the board. In response, play queen b3, a common move in the Evans Gambit, teaming up against the pawn on f7, bishop takes f7 becomes a real threat, leading to checkmate on the next move. Black needs to defend, queen e7 might be played, blundering the queen in one move, ensuring a win. If they play queen d7 instead, defending the pawn, it's an awkward move. You play rook e1, aiming to take the pawn on e5, get to the king, and checkmate. Black becomes defenseless, the king on e8 is vulnerable, knight takes e5 is coming, and if black tries e4, play knight g5, adding another attack against the pawn on f7. In most cases, black plays knight e5, attempting to defend and counterattack. However, it's too late for black to do anything. Their main problem is that the king on e8 is defenseless. Take the pawn on e4, open the diagonal, and after the exchange, threaten the knight and pawn takes, leading to a winning position. Black may try counter-attacking with queen f5, defending and countering the rook, play bishop takes f7, a final blow, check to the king, forcing the capture by the queen, rook takes e5 is check to the king, and the bishop controls key squares. The king has to move to the side, dropping the queen, resulting in a checkmate for black. So that was a nice trap. Hope you enjoyed and learned very much. So wish you all the best. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more. Bye bye. Take care. See you soon.